What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Raptors Report. It is time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because they have brought back a familiar face and one that has a lot of fans divided, and you could even say it's a bit controversial. I'm going to be breaking that down for you in today's video. So if you are ready to watch, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, it was being reported by Keith Pompey yesterday that Colin Castleton is leaving the Sixers for a standard deal with the Raptors, and Blake Murphy added on to this as well. So shout out to him. He was reporting that Castleton will be back on the same deal as Lawson, which is a 2-year contract, which goes into next season, final game of the season, and next year, but 2025-2026 is fully non-guaranteed. Now, Lawson, Castleton get the nod over Swider and Robinson for staying in the summer development program early camp competitions. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I'm a little bit jaded. Orlando Robinson wasn't perfect by any means, but he definitely filled a need for the Toronto Raptors, which was the backup center position. And whereas Colin Castleton, it was a player that you did sign to a 10-day contract. You did let him go, and you did let the 76ers sign him, but it wasn't as if Colin had a spectacular 10 days with the 76ers. He put up 4 points in about 18 minutes played in 4 games, I believe, with the 76ers. So it wasn't a case of maybe the Raptors realized they made a mistake and Colin was playing spectacular with the 76ers and they decided to bring him back. This move makes not a lot of sense for me because Colin Castleton isn't big enough to play the center. He's not strong enough physically, and we've seen it when he was with the Raptors. They did play him with Jakob Poeltl at times, and even with Orlando Robinson as well. So it doesn't exactly fit a need that the Raptors have at the moment. And look, I know what people are going to say. Why are we getting so worked up over guys that are 11th, 12th man off the bench? There's one simple reason only. When the Raptors going into next season, the only center they have on the roster is Jakob Poeltl. Now, we've seen Jakob Poeltl go down with injuries, and obviously the Raptors can still get a center via the draft or free agency. But what if they don't find one through the draft? Now, all of a sudden, you're relying on free agency, which isn't a sure bet. And most importantly, the Raptors are going to have very little money to spend after they draft their players. It's going to leave them less than $5 million or so to spend before they hit the luxury tax as well, which again, you're not getting a great center there either. So I don't understand this move for several reasons. Orlando, look, definitely had some goods and bads to his game. He had difficulty finishing at the rim, but it really makes you question. Orlando was playing spectacular with the Toronto Raptors, given his role, given, the type of player he is. Obviously, you're not expecting him to put up, 20 and 10, but he was still doing a very good job of protecting the rim and just overall being that big body that the Raptors need. Now, going into next season, it's going to be very tricky for the Toronto Raptors because, again, Colin Castleton, where are you playing him? Are you playing him with Scotty Barnes? Because he's not strong enough to guard players, centers, particularly in the post. And also, he just has, I'm sorry to sound so negative about Colin, but he's had a game I actually saw in person versus Portland. He had a handful of boneheaded plays where you just really question what he was doing. And even Garrett Temple talked to him a handful of times and was giving him dirty looks. That's how, frustrated Garrett Temple was. And he's usually not that type of person to get frustrated at guys like this. So again, I'm not very happy with the signing. I would have just liked Orlando to be back. But let's talk about some player comparisons to kind of justify what I mean by some of these, some of the, transactions that the Raptors have made recently. Now, I haven't listed which player is which, but player A and player B here, as you see during the stats here, points per game. Player A averaged 6.9 points. Player B averaged 8.1 points. Player A did a pretty good job of rebounding the ball, 7.4 points, whereas player B, 5.9 rebounds is okay. Assists, they were actually both very similar, 1.8 assists per game. And the player B had 1.9 assists, whereas player A had 0.6 steals, so a little bit more than player B here, who had 0.4 steals per game. Blocks, player A seems to be doing a little bit better. 0.8 blocks. Player B is 0.4 blocks. Now, the field goal percentages are not too bad. Again, they're 47% for player A. For player B, it is shot about 44.7% from the field. 3-point shooting here, player A was shooting 25%, whereas player B was shooting 34%. And finally, free throws here, player A hit 76.5% of his free throws, and player B hit 79.4% of their free throws. Now, obviously, these numbers are very basic numbers when you look at them. And for a lot of fans, they might choose player A or player B, depending on which stats you find a little bit more attractive. But it is also very important to go and take a deep dive into advanced statistics, which is what we're going to do between these two players. And then I'm going to reveal which player is which. So as we see here, these are some of the stats that really define, what the impact the player has had on the floor. So box plus minus is pretty much the essential like impact you've had, how many points you're giving up, how many points you're scoring. And for player A here, minus 5.3 box plus minus. Player B was minus 3.4. Now, offensive box plus minus is essentially just the impact you've had on the offensive side. And as you see there, player A has a negative minus 4.8 box plus minus, whereas player B has minus 2.9 box plus minus. And similarly, defensive box plus minus, essentially the impact you're having on the defensive side here. Again, both players are actually minus 0.5 here. Now, win shares is a very, very important stat to talk about because I think a lot of these kind of stats go a little bit under the radar and underappreciated a little bit. And win shares is essentially an estimated of the number of wins contributed by a player. Now, player A here has a win share of 0.2. Player B has a win share of 1.1. Now, true shooting percentages does take into account free throws, 2-point shots, and 3-point shots as well. Player A did shoot the ball a lot better than player B. Player A shot 53.5% true shooting percentage, whereas player B had a true shooting percentage of 52.3%. Now, I do want to talk about some of the other stats as well. Again, some people may not be familiar with this, so I will explain what total rebound percentage means. And it's essentially an estimate of the percentage of available rebounds a player grabbed while they were on the floor. So again, player A here had a total rebounding percentage of 15.5, and not surprising, player B actually had the same amount as well, 15.5. Now, assist percentage, similarly, when we talk about total rebound percentage, assist percentage is essentially an estimate of the percentage of teammates' field goals a player assisted while they were on the floor. So this is very interesting because player A had an assist percentage of 9.2, whereas player B had 13.5. Now, the last stat I do want to talk about before I do reveal who these players are is PER. Now, player efficiency rating and estimated, it's pretty much a player efficiency rating is a measure of per minute production standardized, such as the league. And the league average for this is usually 15. So again, between the two players, they don't have a great PER, but player A had a PER of 10.4, whereas player B had a PER of 12.9. Now, it shouldn't be too hard to guess which player is which. Player A is Colin Castleton and player B is Orlando Robinson. So when we talk about stats, there is so much more to stats than just points, rebound, assists. And you kind of see the impact that both of these players had on the floor. Again, this is not to state that both of these players are, big time future part of the Toronto Raptors. But again, as someone who has seen the Toronto Raptors play without a center, and now they're going to go into next season with only one center, I have a lot of questions with the way the Raptors make the moves. And I always say this, look, I trust the front office, but you have to question some of these moves, right? Because Colin Castleton, like, where are you playing him? Jonathan Mogbo is a power forward. Scotty Barnes is a power forward. And, even at times you can play Brandon Ingram at the power forward position as well. So how are you going to play Colin Castleton, who isn't strong enough to guard centers? And by the way, Colin Castleton, his height is listed at 6'11", but if you Google it, he's actually 6'8" without shoes. So he's actually closer to 6'10" with shoes than 6'11". So you have to question a lot of these things as well. In today's NBA, it certainly helps to have a taller center, particularly one like Orlando, right? A 7'4" wingspan. And I'm a little bit disappointed. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say is Colin Castleton fits the Darko system a lot better than Orlando. And I would not disagree with you if you told me that. But the question you really have to ask yourself is, after what point do you just decide you're not gonna, are you committed to offense or are you committed to defense? That's the big thing for me personally, because when we had Nick Nurse, what were we doing with the 6'9" lineup? We had a bunch of guys that could play defense, not so many on the offensive side. Now it seems like we're kind of just having a bunch of bunch of players play really good offense and not so much defense. I mean, you could probably count on one hand how many good defensive players this team has. And I mean, even if you get to five, that isn't a lot. 5 out of 15 players, that are good defensive players that can play defense isn't a great number, for a team like the Toronto Raptors as well. So I do have my concerns about this signing. I know what people are going to say. Colin may not even make the roster. What's the big deal? it isn't so much more about Colin. It's the fact that you let Orlando go. So again, unless something happened behind the scenes, which I find it hard to believe because Orlando doesn't seem like the type of player that has attitude issues or is one to cause locker problems, locker room issues as well. So I don't understand the signing. And with respect to Colin, I don't mean this in any disrespectful way. I just was not impressed by him. There's so many other players you could bring on. He wasn't, Colin was he's a pretty decent rebounder for his size. But again, the 3-point shooting, he was supposed to be that, but he didn't really space the floor, not with us, not with the 76ers as well, even though it was limited games. So I don't really understand the logic here, right? Like Orlando can pass as well, just as, well as Colin can as well. So I understand that Colin moves a little bit better when we talk about player movement and how they're able to move their bodies and, shiftiness, but I do not like this signing for several reasons. Again, it's going to be very interesting to see how the Raptors move forward, particularly with that center position. If they don't land a center in the draft, this is all of a sudden going to be really, really challenging. And the one thing I've always said in the past is you need point guards to run your offense and you need centers to anchor your defense. If you have a point guard that can't run an offense, that can't shoot, that can't pass, then that point guard is useless. I'm sorry, and for centers, if you can't score, if you're not great offensively and you're not great defensively either, then like what's the point, right? Again, I don't mean that as a shot towards Colin. I'm just really disappointed by the signing. I just felt like Orlando would have been better long term, but again, or like I said, the front office hopefully knows what they're doing, but I'm not a big fan of this move. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And the trivia question for today is how many NBA teams has Colin Castleton played for? Is it A3? Is it B5? Is it C4? Or is it D6? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. I was supposed to have this video up for you guys this morning, guys. I actually spent 2 hours putting it together, recording it, and then I obviously got the video and it was blurry for the first minute or so, despite the fact that my webcam is perfectly fine. So a little bit disappointed. I didn't get much sleep last night, didn't get the video to you guys, so apologies in advance, but I hope you guys like this video. Again, leave your thoughts down below, and that will be it for today's video. So thank you so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.